So the jets proceeded south, prosecuted two targets, both of which have been used as launch sites for missiles and drones against shipping in the Red Sea. Our initial assessment is that both UK targets were successfully prosecuted. Indeed, our understanding is that all 14 targets that the US and UK prosecuted last night were successfully hit, and all UK jets involved in the mission were safely recovered to RAF Akrotiri by 0300 UK time this morning.
And what was the trigger for this action? What part did the seizure of a tanker by Iran yesterday play?
No, it's very, very important that your viewers understand that the reason for last night's action was self-defense. 2 nights ago, there were sustained attacks onto HMS Diamond, a Royal Navy destroyer that is currently in the southern Red Sea alongside 3 US Navy destroyers. All of those ships are in the region to provide, in turn, security for commercial shipping using this vital global trade route. And it was important, having warned the Houthis over a week ago, the UK, the US, and a large number of allies and partners, that we wouldn't stand for continued attacks on shipping. The attacks on the warships that are there to protect that shipping the other night meant that out of self-defense, we needed to degrade and destroy the Houthi capability, which is exactly what we sought to do last night.
So just to be clear on what the aim was, this is about degrading and destroying Houthi abilities to disrupt global shipping. Is it also, though, about simply enforcing that ultimatum that you issued at the beginning of the year and sending out a broader message to the Houthis?
Well, look, I mean, it's very, very important to stress that the attacks on warships the other night were the event that caused the US and the UK to respond as we have. It was an act of self-defense given those attacks on our warships. And it's important to remember why those warships are there in the first place. We cannot now, no matter what you think of the Houthi argument about their support for Hamas, we can't allow the Houthis to ransom the free flow of global trade in order to make that point. Those are international waters that must remain open and navigable to commercial shipping moving between the Euro-Atlantic and the Indo-Pacific. So that is the significance of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and the southern Red Sea. That is why warships are there in the first place. And the continued attacks on shipping and those warships were the cause for the strikes that you've been briefed about overnight.
How likely is it, though, that the strikes by the Houthis will stop? They've already this morning said that the targeting of ships heading towards Israel will continue. If there are more attacks by the Houthis, can we expect the UK to launch more action?
Well, it's important to stress that the Prime Minister hasn't taken a decision to launch any more strikes. But the warning that the UK, the US and other allies and partners made last week still stands, and the Houthis should take note of that.
So there is the possibility of further action beyond last night's strikes?
Of course, the UK is always going to act in self-defence and to protect our interests and the interests of our allies.
The UK has said it doesn't want to escalate the regional situation, but does this strike overnight risk doing just that, as it'll be perceived by some and certainly portrayed by the Houthis as the West intervening somehow on behalf of Israel, given that the Houthis have said that their attacks are in support of Hamas?
Well, I mean, the Houthis will craft whatever narrative that they wish, but fundamentally they need to understand that the warning that they were given around interfering with the free flow of global trade still stands and is meant, and they've seen that last night. You've also seen, I think, on your TV screens over the last few weeks, an intensive round of diplomacy with David Cameron and Tony Blinken, the UK and US foreign secretaries, constantly speaking to our partners and allies across the Middle East. It's also clear that there are countries in the region who are concerned about the risk of escalation, and they've said so overnight. And as sovereign countries, that's entirely their right to do so. But we've done everything that we can to understand their concerns, to talk to them about the way that we're seeing it, and to manage that escalation risk. And when the Prime Minister sat in Cobra and the National Security Council to consider these options, he was informed in the process by the brilliant analysis of our diplomatic network, our intelligence analysts, and of course our senior military. And he's very much trying to balance the need to protect our interests and to act in self-defense of the warships that are there to ensure freedom of navigation through those vital global trade routes, whilst also guarding against the risk of regional escalation.
Has Parliament been kept sufficiently informed of this action? The Defence Secretary suggested 2 days ago that action might well be imminent, but could a way not have been found for Parliament to debate this ahead of it happening?
Well, look, I think, Anna, if you think about what's implicit in your question, should we have had a big moment when at some length we warned the Houthis what was coming so that they could move all of their capabilities to a safer place in order to re-attack another day? No, absolutely not. That clearly makes no military sense whatsoever. It is unfortunate that the moment that was militarily expedient last night was on the eve of a day on which Parliament doesn't sit, because I know that colleagues around the House, quite legitimately, on behalf of their constituents, will want the opportunity to discuss and debate what has happened and to seek to understand the government's wider analysis on things like escalation, such as you've just asked me. But that moment will come on Monday. And in the meantime, both the Speaker of the House of Commons and the shadow front bench were briefed on Privy Council terms last night before the strikes went in, so that they were fully conversant and understanding of what we were doing and why.
How worried is the government about the economic impact of the disruption in the Red Sea? How much could this impact the UK economy?
Well, I think the government is very concerned about that. If your viewers might want to search on the internet for sort of global shipping trackers, and what they will see is this ant trail of ships moving between the Euro-Atlantic and the Indo-Pacific. Normally, those ships proceed directly across the Indian Ocean and up through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is the choke point at the bottom end of the Red Sea, up through the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, into the Mediterranean. That is the quickest shipping route between the Euro-Atlantic and the Indo-Pacific. What they will see if they go to those ship tracking websites now is that all global trade is currently proceeding around the south of Africa, around the Horn, which is the longest way. Now, the impact of that is ships go out of position, shipping costs increase, and supply chains become disrupted. And on the back of a period of time where, as a consequence of the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, global supply chains have been disrupted with all of the impact that we've seen on inflation and prices and cost of living, it's of course a concern to see this vital global artery, Bab el-Mandeb Strait and the southern Red Sea, be disrupted in the way that the Houthis have over the last few weeks. And that's why the Royal Navy and the US Navy have such a strong naval presence in the region. And out of self-defense for that naval task force, that's why we did the strikes that we did last night.
OK, well, James Heappey, Armed Forces Minister, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much indeed for filling us in on the events overnight. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.